Chapter 13, Belinda's Last Chance. After Samuel had taken me home and left with Belinda to gather some of her clothing and bring her back, I phoned Effie to inform her of what had occurred and gave her instructions about cleaning the house. I could tell from her tone of voice that even though she was upset about Daddy, she was particularly happy Belinda wouldn't be in her way for the next few days. She took great pride in her work and was almost upset about what Belinda had done as I was. As soon as I finished my phone conversation, I asked my own newly appointed maid, Loretta, to make me a cup of tea. Loretta had come to me by way of a Boston agency and was, I thought, similar in character to Effie, serious, sincere, and efficient. I sat by the window in my own den office and gazed at the very gray world. From this angle, I had a small but clear view of the ocean behind the house and caught sight of a trawler making its way north. We were lucky to be living by sea, Daddy had once told me. I can't imagine what life is like stuck in a city, high-rise, gazing out at more brick and concrete and steel. We can look out like this and see ships go by and imagine that they're going to some exotic ports on beautiful lands. Someday I suppose you'll do a great deal of traveling, Olivia. You're sure to see more of the world than I have. Why, Daddy? Why haven't you traveled more? Oh, I guess I was just too involved in my businesses. Don't be like me. Get out there, do things, see things, explore, he advised. See the world. Take an ocean voyage whenever you can. Ironically, I felt as if it was more of a fantasy for me now than it ever was for him. Our businesses was literally 3 or 4 times the size it was when I sat back and gazed dreamily at the passing ships. Along with the economic growth came 3 or 4 times more responsibility, and with a sister who was more a child than a woman, a husband who had limited business abilities, now a father who was invalid, my ship of adventure would remain moored to dock for a long time to come, I thought. Anyway, I was reminded of Ishmael telling Captain Peleg in Moby Dick that he wanted to go whaling to see the world. Peleg told him to stand and look over the side of the ship and tell him what he saw. He saw nothing but water and a considerable horizon. Well then, Peleg said, what does thou think of seeing the world? That was the view of the world from a ship, most of the journey a sailor made. I could see the same world from my own shore. Maybe my real father was a sailor and my mother had revealed, but the sea quest that was in his blood didn't seep into mine. I was content, enjoying an occasional sail and living here in my own world where I could be secure and have some control over my destiny. I remembered a talk that Daddy had with me one night. You and I have had some very grown-up talks, Olivia, he said. I think you're going to become an adult much sooner than other girls your age. I'm happy and sad at the same time, he said. You'll miss something of your childhood. Don't be sad, Daddy, I don't mind. Okay, he said, smiling. Good night, little general. Good night, Daddy, I said. There weren't all that many soft moments in my life to remember like that, but tonight, sitting here alone thinking about Daddy, half destroyed by the stroke, now incapacitated in the hospital, those memories, few and far between, returned, some only vague images, some vivid. I sat there thinking so long I didn't realize how much time had passed. The gray skies had turned leaden, and the sea disappeared in the dusk before I heard Belinda and Samuel come into the house. Belinda was loud and complaining. I rose and went to see what was wrong. Effie didn't offer to bend a pinky to help me, Olivia. She took one look at us and went off to do cleaning something else. Belinda moaned. What kind of maid is that? I want you to fire her. She's the best one we've had since Carmelita, I said. This is not the time for us to go firing people and looking for new servants, Belinda. There's much more important matters at hand. Just go up to the guest room and Loretta will help you, I said, as Loretta appeared. We're having dinner soon, and we're going to try to calm down and gather strength for the days to come. Oh, great, she gripped to Samuel. It sounds like I'm going to have to become a prisoner in my sister's house now. Hardly, I said. But you're going to behave yourself while Daddy's in the hospital, and especially when he comes out and needs your help. Maybe I should plan a trip so I can get out of everyone's way, she suggested as a threat. I nodded. Yes, maybe you should, I replied. I took her down a peg. She started to stammer, but headed up to the guest room instead. Belinda didn't take a trip after all, until after Daddy had been released from the hospital and in his therapy at home had begun. His neurologist felt Daddy might reach 60% of his previous motor capabilities during 6 months of therapy. But there wouldn't be any improvement after that. It meant he had to spend hours with a speech therapist and physical therapist. The activity and presence of all the medical personnel unnerved Belinda. Ironically, Belinda, who was his true blood daughter, couldn't stand the sight of him twisted and diminished in his wheelchair. She avoided him as much as she could during the months of therapy at home. She was at the office more than usual just to get away from it all, and finally she decided to take a trip to visit some friends in Florida. I was at my last trimester of pregnancy, and although I was feeling the best I'd had during the entire term, I was glad to get her out of my hair for a while. Daddy felt horrible about being a burden and began every one of my visits bemoaning his condition and telling me to send everyone away and let him be. He cried a lot too, which Dr. Covington explained to be part of his condition. I tried to keep his spirits up by making detailed business reports every afternoon, but most of the time he was too exhausted to listen. Samuel was good about visiting Daddy almost daily. He really didn't enjoy being trapped in the office anyway. He did get permission to take Daddy for some rides, and even worked out a short motorboat ride on a particularly beautiful weekend day. Before Belinda returned from Florida, Nelson and Louise Childs visited Daddy. Samuel came to tell me that afternoon, and I regretted not being there, even though I thought I looked like a small blimp. I had seen Nelson only a few brief times since the wedding, but before I had become bloated and waddled instead of walked, he and Louise were busy sitting up their home and had begun to take more legal chores at his father's firm. 6 months after their wedding, Louise became pregnant too. He's just trying to keep up with me, Samuel bragged. I hardly think fathering a child is much of an accomplishment, Samuel, I told him. It's certainly not my test of manhood. He just laughed and shook his head at me the way he always did when I said something which he didn't agree. During the last month of my pregnancy, I spent less time at the office. Samuel brought home important papers for me to peruse. One night, I had some bleeding, and I had to be taken to the hospital. It turned out to be nothing serious, but I was irritable and uncomfortable all through the final 2 weeks. Then on Sunday, right before dinner, my water broke, and Samuel rushed me to the hospital where I delivered my firstborn son, who we named Jacob for my father's father. I held my baby in my arms and looked up at Samuel's beaming face. "He's the best piece of work we've done together, Olivia," he declared. "We've done? Well, I had a little to do with it, didn't I?" he protested. "Yes, you did, a little. That's what men contribute, a little. You didn't have back pains, vomit, struggle to get up from your chair, go through hell at the delivery room," I reminded him. He laughed. "I guess not, but he looks like me, doesn't he?" "Maybe he'll grow out of that," I said, and Samuel laughed harder. "I declare, Olivia, if I didn't know better, I think you would have been both mother and father, if you could have, and liked it too," he said. Maybe he was right. In any case, I thought, looking at Jacob's tiny face and hands, I'd begun my own family. We hired a nanny immediately to help me with Jacob. Her name was Thelma Stewart. She had 5 children of her own, all grown and living their own lives. Her husband had died years before. Nevertheless, Samuel was ecstatic that our newborn was a male, and the sight of Jacob did appear to brighten Daddy's spirits. He truly enjoyed our visits with Jacob and seemed more animated when the baby was present. He enjoyed holding him. By that time, he regained use of his arm. Belinda had a strange reaction to the sight of her newborn nephew. She complimented him, of course, but she had no interest in holding him, feeding him, or being around him for long. She told Thelma that babies made her nervous. When she looked at Jacob and then lifted her eyes and looked at me, we both knew what put this tension in her face. "Who'd have thought you would have ever become someone's mother?" she said with a laugh. She meant to tease me, but I glared at her. "Why not?" I replied after a moment. "I have had to be yours for so long." "Very funny, Olivia. You see, Thelma, she's always knocking me down. I could get a complex." "Please spare us," I cried. Thelma laughed, but I knew she was perceptive enough to see how much of a burden Belinda had been and still was. When Louise Childs gave birth, Samuel was again ecstatic. He came to the office to tell me with a wide gloating smile on his face. "Guess what?" he said, stepping into my office. "Louise gave birth this morning, but it was a daughter." "There's nothing wrong with having a daughter, Samuel." "And they're both doing well?" "Yes, but Nelson's not. He went into hiding," he said with a laugh. "The only thing with less intelligence than a chauvinistic man is a clam," I declared, and he roared. Nevertheless, he bragged, "I've got a boy." The first year of Jacob's life passed so quickly, I couldn't believe we were celebrating his first birthday so soon. Daddy had improved to the point where he could carry on a short conversation and walk with a walker. His arm didn't regain half of the strength it had, and it resembled like a claw. He had to eat very slowly, and it was always very messy. Belinda got so she couldn't take a meal with him and avoided doing so. It turns my stomach to see soup drool down his chin. "Olivia, don't yell at me," she cried when I complained about her leaving Daddy to eat his dinner. alone every single night. I can't eat, and that upsets him more. I didn't doubt that she had trouble sitting there. She was never good at stomaching anything. Even a cut in her finger terrified her. The sight of blood turned her a shade whiter than milk. I never forgot how sickly pale and terrified she looked the night she gave birth to the premature fetus. Well, try not to make him feel like some sort of creature, Belinda. Imagine what he's going through. And look at all the unpleasantness he's helped you through, I lectured. I'll try, she promised. But still, she rarely ate with him. Maybe Daddy's better off with her out of his sight. But she was still doing very little with her life. She tried to take adult education secretarial course given at the high school in the evening, promising to master some skills and do something worthwhile at Daddy's office. Daddy actually had high hopes for her and was upset when he learned a few months later that she stopped going to class. She pretended she was attending, but simply met her degenerate friends and either went bar hopping or, if the weather was good, a party on the beach or on someone's yacht. It got so I couldn't keep track of who she was with and when. There were just too many new boys in her life. The stories about her flowed freely my way, of course. Our acquaintances, especially the wives of our business associates, love leaking the tales to me or to Samuel. Finally, I decided to take some serious action, and I went to see Daddy early one afternoon. I was determined to stop my sister from tearing down everything good and respectable about our family. Why should I have to be afraid to go to restaurants and social affairs, afraid that someone would mention her and ruin the evening? I found Daddy dozing in the living room and woke him. His eyes grew dark. "We can't ignore it any longer," I began. "I've written to Collier Business College in Boston, and I've gotten Belinda enrolled in the courses for the first year. Yesterday I spoke with Cousin Paula, and she agreed to rent the upstairs room to Belinda. It's walking distance from the school. You've got to insist that she goes, or you'll cut off all funds if she doesn't, and succeed. Daddy, I don't know what will become of her. This is the very last time I'm going to try to help." He stared at me with those big watery eyes. His lower lip looked unhinged in the right corner, just showing some teeth. He nodded and promised, but I had to come to the house and be there when Belinda put up her usual opposition. "I don't want to live with Cousin Paula," she whined. "She's old and cranky. She'll make my life miserable. I'd rather have my own apartment," she concluded, "or I won't go," she said, stamping her foot like some petulant 5-year-old. "This is an enormous expense, and frankly, Belinda, it would be a gamble in your case, and Daddy and our family have lost enough money because of you. You don't need your own apartment. Cousin Paula lives alone. It'll work out well for both of you." "She never liked me, Daddy," she moaned, "and I never liked her. She's the one with the attitude. How can a woman be like that? She doesn't have to fall in love with you, Belinda, and you don't have to fall in love with her. Just obey the rules and go to school. This is your last opportunity to try to do something with your life." "Why? I'm going to get married anyway. I'll just make sure I marry someone with money." "When?" "Soon," she promised. "Until then, develop some skills. You can return to work at our business if you have some skills," I added. "Oh, wouldn't that be wonderful?" she moaned. She looked away, then at Daddy. "I can go to Boston for a year. Daddy needs me there." "You're not here, and when you are, you're of no help to him anyway," I snapped. "Now Daddy and I have discussed this, and you'll either go to school or get a real job, not working for us. Frankly, you can't do anything for us, but maybe you can work as a waitress or something." "A waitress? Never." "Daddy is not going to give you any more money," I said sternly. "Daddy," she pleaded, turning to him. I looked at him and he raised his heavy, sad eyes to me. I made a face warning him to hold fast. Olivia's right, he said. He struggled with his words, but he got them out. I've been wrong not to make you do something before this. That's great. You're both ganging up on me. She folded her arms under her breast and pouted for a moment. Am I going to get an allowance for Boston then? You'll get what you need, what you reasonably need, I said. Daddy will decide how much I get, she fired back at me. Then I'll go. I looked at him and he closed his eyes and opened and nodded at me. You're a spoiled brat, Belinda. You've only taken from your family and you haven't given back anything. I'll do the best I can, she cried. Don't I, Daddy? He grimaced. Let's end this, I said. Daddy can't take much more. I'll make the arrangements for your transportation and call Cousin Paula tonight. You can't wait to get rid of me. I don't know why, she sang. Her eyes became bemused. I'm not trying to take anyone away from you. There's no one you could take from me that I wouldn't give up myself if they went away with you, Belinda. Huh? Forget it, I said. I hope you really try to do something this time. I really do. Otherwise what? I'll send you to the highest bidder, I said, and left to make the arrangements. Despite her protestations, Belinda was happy to be leaving the house. She was always excited about going to Boston. She got Daddy to buy her a new wardrobe over my objections, and I knew she was planning on moving out of Cousin Paula's house and getting her own apartment as soon as she could work it out. She would then invite her bubblegum friends to Boston and get herself into another bust, I was sure. However, I had at least tried. I owed that to Mother, and after this I felt my debt was well paid. Little did I know, I was just beginning to endure the true cost. I was actually fooled into thinking I'd finally made the right choice for Belinda. She enrolled and began her schooling without any more whining and crying. She even got along with Cousin Paula at the start, and after a few weeks she sent us good reports from the school. With her gone from Providencetown, the stories died, and I was able to concentrate on business and my family. We expanded even more. Samuel told me Nelson thought that we should consider offering stock in our company on the stock exchange. Let him come and discuss it with me himself, I told Samuel, but Nelson didn't come. His father retired from the firm and Nelson became the senior partner. He won some significant cases in Boston and was written up in local newspapers, as well as the Boston ones. Nelson was then appointed to fill the term of judgeship. It was assumed he would run for political office in the near future. I remember feeling that our lives had rounded some long and arduous turn, and we were coasting along now, relatively secure and content. Jacob was running about, spending many of his afternoons with Daddy, who had begun to feel so good that he started to violate the rules about smoking and diet. When I chastised him, he begged me to let him have the simple pleasures. That's all he had left, he claimed. I was so involved in my own work, I paid little attention to Samuel and never noticed that he was unhappy. One night at dinner, he put down the silverware and put his elbows on the table. I think it's time you and I had a little talk, Olivia, he began firmly, his eyes fixed on me like two welding torches. It was quite uncharacteristic for Samuel to take this tone of voice with me, especially in the presence of our servants. I raised my eyebrows and looked at Thelma, who just finished feeding Jacob. You can take him to his room now, Thelma, I instructed, and she did so. What is it, Samuel? I asked as soon as she was gone. What could possibly be bothering you so much that you would speak to me like that in front of Thelma? You have no idea? He said, amazed. No, I don't. I'm sorry, but I've been quite busy these last few days. In any case, I'm not in the mood to play a game of 20 questions. If there's something bothering you, tell me directly, without any unnecessary dramatics. He shook his head and looked away a moment before turning back to me. Your door, Olivia, has been locked for months, and months now. I've respected it, and I haven't pushed myself on you. But it's not natural for a man and woman to live like this when they're married, he said. Then he sat back. Did you know that Louise Childs is pregnant again? And there are no locked doors in that marriage. Oh, so that's it. You're afraid Nelson Childs will pull ahead of you with his baby-making contest, I accused. No, that's not it, Olivia. My God, I have needs, male needs. I can't even imagine why you don't have female needs. All these months, you were never once attracted or interested in me? He looked amazed, even hurt. I softened and sat back and sipped my coffee. I've just been occupied, Samuel. It has nothing to do with you. What do you mean it has nothing to do with me? How do you think I felt all this time? You go to sleep at night, you put aside your worries. He glared at me. Well, I'm sorry, I said. I didn't have relationships on my mind. On your mind. He laughed and then leaned forward with his hands folded on the table. I hope that door is not locked tonight, he said. It could have sounded more like a threat. I felt the heat rise in my face and my heart began to thump. Don't take that tone with me, Samuel. I won't have it. I'm not anyone's plaything. He snorted. Plaything? You're about as far away from being that as a nun. That's enough. Change the topic, I ordered. I turned away from him. I felt him glaring at me a moment, and then he rose and left the room. I sat there trembling. How could he speak to me like that? What gave him that courage? Miss Hot, Miss Cold. I could hear the children chanting in at us. Was it true for me? Samuel was far from an ugly man, and most of the women I knew flirted with him and probably fantasized about him. Why I should be so indifferent, I didn't know, but I couldn't help how I was, could I? Surely I wouldn't have become like this if I married Nelson, I thought. Or would I? That night I fingered the lock on the adjoining door. But in the end, I did unlock it and went to bed with the remaining in place. After I put out the lights, I heard Samuel try the door, then of course under his breath. Then curse under his breath. The following dinner, he had gone to the den and sat for the remainder, even drinking brandy. He had his back to the door and didn't turn when I looked in on him before going to sleep. I started to drift when I heard what sounded like a key in my locked bedroom door. I opened my eyes and listened, then I saw the door open. Who's there? I cried, sitting up. The light spilled in from the hallway. Only your husband, Samuel said with a short, cold laugh. Remember me? You have a key to my room. What are you doing? He approached the bed wearing a robe, and then he undid the belt of the robe and let it fall to the floor. He was naked. Samuel, you stop this. You turn around. I won't be denied my rights, he declared and crawled in the bed beside me. I tried to get out from the other side, but he seized me around the waist and held me tightly to him. Samuel, you've got to forget how good it can be, Olivia. You just forgot. I'm here to help you revive your memory, he said and laughed. I tried to push him away, but he was too strong and determined. I swear, if you don't cooperate, I'll tell everyone. I'll tell your father. I'll tell your sister. I will, he promised. And you know how big mouth she has. I'll even tell Nelson, he added, so he won't tease me anymore. My breath caught and my heart stopped and started. There was nothing to do but stop resisting, and so I did. There, he said after he spent himself in me. Wasn't that good? Are you sorry you've not had more of it? I turned my back to him. You don't have to thank me, he muttered. The next day I tried to be angry, but he behaved as if we were getting along just fine. He was full of laughter and jokes and jolly with everyone. When I returned home that night, I was shocked to discover that the lock on the adjoining door had been removed. I started to complain, but he put up his hand. "Nelson Childs told me it's grounds for divorce," he said. "What? You told Nelson? You had no right to tell anyone our private affairs. How dare you? What difference does it make now, Olivia? That's over. We're really like husband and wife again. No more walls and locks between us, right?" "Right," he said, answering his own question. He came to me twice more that month, and quite often after that, until I realized I was pregnant again. It seemed to be what he wanted the most. "We're going to have another boy," he declared when he heard. "I just know it." I used my pregnancy as an excuse to keep him out of my room, and this time he didn't protest. And when I had the lock returned, he didn't want to do anything to endanger the child. A month later, Louise Childs gave birth to a boy they named Kenneth, and Nelson and Samuel celebrated until the wee hours of the morning. I heard him once come home and collapse in his bed. Slowly I rose and went to the adjoining door, opening it. I looked in at him sprawled out on the bed in his clothes. He reeked of whiskey and cigars. I heard him groan. "Where have you been?" "What? Oh," he said, smiling. "My wife has come to me." "That's something. She's never do. See, it worked." "She does want me." "Stop it, you're disgusting. I don't suppose Nelson's this drunk." "Nelson?" he laughed. "They carried him home. That's how drunk your precious, perfect Nelson Childs got." "He's not my precious, perfect Nelson Childs," I said, stepping back. Samuel laughed. "Come here," he said, reaching up for me. "Stop it." I turned, frightened. He struggled to stand and fell back on the bed. "You've got to come over here, Olivia Gordon Logan. Your husband wants you." "My husband is a drunken fool," I snapped back at him. "Huh?" "Go to sleep and don't complain to me how you feel in the morning," I said, quickly returning and locking the door behind me. I heard him laugh and then fall to the floor. A little while after that, he was pounding at the adjoining door. "Samuel, you'll wake everyone. Stop," I cried. He continued to pound on the door. I got up and unlocked it, and he stumbled and swayed and stepped into my room. "I demand my conjugal rights," he said, raising his right forefinger. He walked to my bed and fell across on his face. I lifted his feet up and took his shoes off and threw his legs over the bed. Then I put on my robe and went down to our guest room, leaving him groaning there in his drunken stupor. He was quite ashamed of himself and apologetic the next morning. I let him wallow in his remorse and gave him the silent treatment. Of all that he had done and said, his remark about my precious, perfect Nelson frightened me the most. I had never done anything or said anything to give Samuel the impression I had strong feeling toward Nelson. From what well of knowledge did he draw that pale of truth, I wondered. It wouldn't be long before I tracked it to Belinda, who, in her innocent little way, enjoyed planting seeds of trouble into my world to see what crop of pain she could grow for me. Apparently, despite my anger, the harvest only had just begun.